Imagine this. You're a cowboy riding through a dusty town, exhausted from days on the trail. You stop by the local pharmacy, where the friendly druggist hands you a tonic, laced with cocaine. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit parlor, wealthy women sip laudanum to calm their nerves. Across town, miners smoke opium after long hours in dangerous caves, while a traveling salesman promises a miraculous elixir that can cure everything. Though it's mostly alcohol and morphine, this was the Wild West, a time when drugs weren't just common. They were a part of daily life. No prescriptions, no regulations, and no real understanding of addiction. It was a free-for-all, and everyone, from cowboys to lawmen, was using something. Think the Wild West was just about shootouts and gold rushes? Think again. Drugs played a massive role in shaping the era, fueling hard-working pioneers, soothing the wounded, and even leading to some of the most notorious crimes in American history. Some of these drugs are illegal today. Others, you probably have them in your medicine cabinet right now. Stick around till the end to find out how the drug culture of the Wild West still influences the modern world. And trust me, some of this history will shock you. How did drugs become so common in the Wild West? To understand why drugs were everywhere in the Wild West, you have to look at the conditions people lived in. Harsh journeys. Traveling west wasn't easy. Pioneers faced hunger, illness, injury, and exhaustion. Medicine was scarce, so opium and laudanum were given as quick fixes. Gold rush and railroads. The Gold Rush, 1848 to 1855, and the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, 1863 to 1869, led to massive drug use. Miners, railroad workers, and settlers relied on stimulants like cocaine to work long hours. No medical knowledge. At the time, germs and bacteria were barely understood. Doctors prescribed heroin, morphine, and alcohol for common illnesses, thinking they were safe. No drug laws. Until the early 1900s, anyone could buy any drug over the counter. No regulations, no age restrictions, no warnings. Now, let's break down the most popular drugs of the time. Opium, the most widespread drug. Opium was the king of drugs in the Wild West. It came in many forms. Raw opium, smoked in dens. Laudanum, a liquid form mixed with alcohol. Opium pills, swallowed for pain. Doctors prescribed it for everything. Headaches, fever, coughing, diarrhea, menstrual cramps, and even colic in babies. That's right. Parents gave opium to their babies to make them sleep. Opium dens and the Chinese influence. The gold rush brought a wave of Chinese immigrants to America, many of whom had already been using opium in China. They introduced opium dens, which became a controversial part of Western cities like San Francisco and Denver. Opium dens were dark, smoky rooms where people lay down on bunks, inhaling the drug through long pipes. At first, only Chinese workers used them, but soon white Americans, especially gamblers and prostitutes, started visiting too. Law enforcement didn't care until white people got addicted. In 1875, San Francisco passed the first anti-opium law, but it mainly targeted Chinese immigrants, not the drug itself. Cocaine, the Wild West energy drink. Before cocaine became illegal, it was seen as a miracle drug. Cowboys and lawmen used it to stay awake on long rides. Railroad workers took it to keep working 16-hour shifts. Doctors recommended it for everything from asthma to depression. Cocaine-infused drinks. One of the most famous cocaine products? Coca-Cola. When it was first created in 1886, Coca-Cola contained real cocaine. People believed it boosted energy, improved focus, and even cured stomach problems. And they weren't wrong. Cocaine does do that. The problem? It's insanely addictive. By the early 1900s, doctors noticed people were becoming dependent on the drink, and in 1904, Coca-Cola removed cocaine from its formula. But for decades, cocaine was a key part of the Wild West lifestyle. Whiskey, the cowboy's best friend. Alcohol, especially whiskey, was everywhere. Every town had saloons, often doubling as makeshift pharmacies. Whiskey was used as pain relief, disinfectant, and even medicine. Gunfighters drank before duels to calm their nerves. But whiskey wasn't just for fun. It was a survival tool. In many places, clean water was hard to find, so people drank alcohol instead. Of course, alcoholism was a huge problem. Drunken fights, murders, and gambling losses were common. Fun fact: in the 1880s, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and other famous lawmen were known for their drinking habits. In some cases, they were just as rowdy as the outlaws they were chasing. Heroin, the safe drug. Yep, heroin was actually sold as a non-addictive substitute for morphine. It was marketed as a cough syrup. It was prescribed for children's colds. Even Bayer, the company behind aspirin, sold it. Doctors didn't realize how addictive heroin was until it was too late. By the early 1900s, the government started cracking down, but many people were already hooked. Snake oil, the greatest scam of the West. If you lived in the Wild West, chances are a traveling salesman tried to sell you a miracle cure. These so-called medicines often contain alcohol, morphine, or cocaine. People bought them, believing they could cure arthritis, tuberculosis, baldness, and even cancer. The salesman would make their money and leave town before people realized it was a scam. This is where the term snake oil salesman comes from, a phrase still used today for people who sell fake cures or make false promises. The beginning of drug laws. By the early 1900s, the government finally realized how bad the drug problem had become. 1906. The Pure Food and Drug Act forced companies to list ingredients. 1914. The Harrison Narcotics Act made cocaine and opium prescription only. 1920. Prohibition made alcohol illegal, but that's another crazy story. These laws didn't end drug use, but they marked the beginning of America's war on drugs. The Wild West was a time of adventure, expansion, and danger, but it was also an era of unchecked drug use, wild medical practices, and some of the most bizarre cures in history. Cowboys, lawmen, settlers, and even respected doctors had no idea that the very substances they relied on, opium, cocaine, heroin, laudanum, and whiskey, were dangerously addictive. Imagine a world where painkillers contained pure morphine, cough syrups were laced with heroin, and Coca-Cola actually gave you a cocaine buzz. It sounds insane, but for people in the Wild West, this was just a normal part of life. Some of these drugs are now illegal, while others are still widely used today, but in controlled, regulated forms. However, the impact of this lawless drug era is still felt in modern times. The opioid crisis, the beginnings of pharmaceutical regulation, even the way we view addiction today. It all ties back to the Wild West. So, what's the takeaway? History repeats itself. In the 1800s, people believed heroin was safe. Today, we see similar debates over prescription drugs, energy drinks, and over-the-counter meds. The lesson? Question what you're being sold. Today's cure could be tomorrow's crisis. Which drug shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this wild history dive, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more crazy stories. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Rock it.